Range Rovers. I always talk about money pits. Well, this guy, it hasn't been a money pit yet. He got it from a relative who paid a lot of money. He only paid 25 grand with 40-something thousand miles. He's put about 70,000 miles on it, but he's got some nibbling problems with the transmission code. He's losing a little coolant, so let's check it out. There's no doubt they're beautiful vehicles, and they're very comfortable. A lot of leg room here, and it's got a decent little trunk, which of course, when you put the seats down, you can actually carry quite a bit. And even though it's spent its winters in Rhode Island, not particularly rusty. We'll look under here. You can see, still pretty clean. Where they sealed it, now you can see the bare steel's got a little rust, but it's solid. It's not rusting out by any means. They certainly perfected that. But he's worried because he had a friend with the same year, 2013. And the guy got a $13,000 transmission done. He's paid for a special warranty. Luckily he did and had the transmission replaced. He's starting to get some tranny codes. So what we're gonna do is scan it, take it for a road trip. So we got it plugged in. We'll do an auto scan. Gotta remember to turn on the key first. While we're waiting, we can see they're comfy, beautiful cars to riding around. There's no arguing that. We'll do an automatic scan. There's 40 things it's scanning. As usual, it's a Range Rover. And you can see there's a lot of failures. The powertrain control module has 30 failures, but you can see there's failures all over the place, and we're only halfway through. Granted, some of these things are nitpicky stuff, but it's pretty typical with any Range Rover, basically any English vehicle. Later model ones, you hook up a scan tool, you're going to get codes coming out the wazoo. Electricity and English, maybe they should have stayed in the dark ages with candles. Again, you can see failure, 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 failure. Failure 8 failures, failure 12 failures. I mean, we could spend a lot of time going through this. Start with a powertrain control module. Diagnose trouble codes. And there's a whole list of them. 30 of these babies. Lost communication with restraints. Gear shift lever position sensor. Multiple sensor correlating correctly. Throttle position sensor. Lost communication with ABS. Look at this. These things are just total insanity. The amount of invalid data received from transmission control module. There are so many codes. Basically, the only thing we can do is erase them, take it for a road test, see if any hobbyists want to come back. But that's what you got to deal with these things. They're over complex electronically. It's just a level of insanity, make your head spin. One of the big reasons I tell people not to buy them. Go back and we'll erase them before we go on a road test. Transmission control module has one failure. It was worried about the transmission. High-speed CAN communication bus. So it's a communication failure with the transmission. It often happens on these things. They are so complex. You got a bus line. It does low speed, mid-range, and high-speed data all flying on the same line. It's just enough to make your head spin. We're going to erase that too. Just for kicks, we'll look at the body control module. It's got 7 failures. Tire pressure, sensors, wacky. High beam circuit, wacky. Lost communication with engine control module / powertrain control module A. Lost communication with transmission control module. So yeah, we got communication problems with the transmission. Doesn't mean there's necessarily a transmission problem itself. It's the computer system that activates it. That's very complex. Now the all-terrain control module has to do with transmission too, so we'll check that system out. Lost communication with engine control module, powertrain control module, lost communication with transmission control module with differential, invalid data. Like I said, you could spend a week of Sundays analyzing one of these things with all these codes and all the insanity. If you're willing to drive a car with lights on and it runs good enough and you don't care, but if you're a fanatic about your car being in tip-top shape, you don't want to buy one of these things. What we're going to do is this. We're going to go back to the main data. Okay, we're going to erase everything. Now it's erasing everything. We're going to take it for a road test. Clearing all the codes. Now all the codes are gone, and we will take it for a road test. In reverse with its little electronics, got a backup camera. We'll take it for a good ride. Now, reasonably smooth riding. They're fun to drive. That's how they sell them. They're beautiful looking, just like Jaguars. It's not just a coincidence that it's Jaguar Land Rover Company. Neither of which are known for making vehicles that don't break down all the time and cost a fortune to fix when they do. But we're going to take it for a good spin, see if the transmission acts up at all, and just look at the codes once we're done taking it for a drive. Now, there's one thing about driving around in a Range Rover in Rhode Island here is you don't feel out of place. There's so many millionaires around here. You can join the crew. Hey, I should go the other way and go to the Polo Grounds. I can fit right in with the Polo Grounds with my Range Rover Evoque. No, I'm driving around. It seems to shift perfectly fine. I don't feel any wiggles or gyrations. Mechanically, it seems in good shape, but there's so many computer modules and control units on it that make your head spin. So we're driving the heck out of the thing, and we'll see if any codes pop up after we drive it a while. Okay, I have to say, they're comfortable, they're fun to drive. And I guess if you want to impress people how rich you are, that you don't care how much it costs to fix it, maybe you'd love driving one of these things around. Well, let's see if any codes came back while we drove. Let's do the automatic scan again, see what happens. So far, it's all clean. Look, nothing. There's one failure. We'll check that later. In the heating and air conditioning, but I mean, what do you expect? No transmission codes. The gear shift module B does have a code. So let's look at that. And it says intermittent, invalid data received from the body control module, invalid data received from the engine control module, invalid data received from the gear shift control module. Okay, so that's the only thing that really popped up, showing that yes, there is some type of wiring problem or module problem in the transmission system, and the gear shift module would be the thing that would be highly suspect, because it's what popped up first. A lot of those other codes were historical codes somebody never erased. The gear shift module came back. It doesn't look like there's any kind of serious problem in the transmission itself. There's a special battery in there for the gear shift that can raise it up and down. Yes, I'm not making this up. This is a level of insanity these English have gone to. And he did replace that battery, and he said when he did, it acted a little bit better than it did before. When you get a level of complexity like that, any little thing can act up. He did say that when the transmission did act up, it didn't act up on me, but when it did on him, it used to be that he could shut the car off, start it back up, it would go perfectly fine, which shows that it's obviously some type of computer module malfunction or wiring malfunction. And now he said, sometimes no, it won't. So, just out of curiosity, if he wants to spend some money and get a gear shift module and put it in, it might solve his problem that he's got. But realize one thing, it has to be recalibrated if you install a new one. But there's only one problem. Do you want to guess with $1,000 plus module? It's $1,008. Just for that little module itself. You can't buy them at AutoZone. You can only get them from Range Rovers. And they stick it to you on these parts. There are scores of these modules. If you added all the parts together, the car would probably be $1 million if you bought them piece by piece. So realize this about these things. They don't come cheap. And they aren't easy to diagnose either. But the good news is the transmission itself is mechanically in great shape. It's just all the computer crap that controls it that has some problems with it. In the case of this, hey, guy got a good deal on it. He's put 70,000 miles on it. I would say it's probably time to pass it on by so he doesn't have to deal with. He's talking about getting a nice Toyota. He said the only problem is you can keep the Toyotas more than 10 years, and the problem is, well, you're going to be driving a Toyota for 10 years. So he's kind of bought into this image thing too. Me, I don't care about image. I'd get the Toyota and say, back in the day when these things were real trucks, especially the ones with diesel engines, yeah, they could run a long time, but there's a limited lifespan on this. Realize also, this thing's only got a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine in it. Eventually, from the weight of the vehicle, that will wear out. It's fast, but eventually it is going to wear out. I was surprised at how fast it was. Then I look under the hood, it's got a 2-liter 4-cylinder turbo engine. Goes zoom, zoom, but when that goes, the sky's the limit. And this thing runs so good now, he can probably get some really good money for it and just say, okay, I've had my experience with British products. Now it's time to move on to the Japanese, where I won't have to spend any money and think about it breaking down the line and worry about insane things like gear shifts that can move up and down. Do we really need such things? I don't think so. All right, here we have a 2017 Nissan Rogue, made in, of all places, Korea. Manufactured by Renault Samson Motors for Nissan Motor Company. Okay, these are made in Korea. Now, from my experience of these, I would not buy one of these. For a while, they were made under contract in Korea. They're now made in Tennessee, where they seem to be somewhat better than these. Now this one's got a serious problem. It's coming from the front of the motor here. It's got a timing chain in there. But unfortunately, you're not going to hear the noise until the end of the video because I have to film that tomorrow morning. It only does it when it's cold. And I've seen it 1,000 times in these. They have a timing chain tensioner that doesn't work right. The timing chain tensioner works by oil pressure. When the engine's cold, it doesn't push out fast enough. The engine rattles for a few seconds, then it stops rattling. That's because the tensioner needs replaced. Now you got to take the engine apart to do it, where it's kind of a pain in the butt. Many people will drive them years this way. If the noise only lasts for a short time and goes away, a lot of Toyotas will do that too. And I've seen people drive the Toyotas years that way. Now, particular vehicle's been wrecked on the side, and I can see they didn't fix it perfectly because I can hear clunking coming on this side. It's a noise of suspension bushing. It was a $10,000 insurance job, so it was a relatively big job, right? And this is why I tell people, you get in a big wreck, it's not a great idea to usually keep the car because something is going to go wrong as time goes on. And I can hear it clunking. Now, it handles okay and everything. But since it's been a wreck, I don't trust anything. I'm getting out the big computer. And I do mean big. It's the biggest one I ever had. It's a new Autel. I'm impressed by it so far. So we got it hooked up. We'll turn the key on and we'll set things up. So we'll do a pre-scan. Not scanning. Woo, man, this baby's fast. Look at it go. All right, so you can see all these systems are good. The only problem is fault in the laser radar system. That's that laser cruise stuff. We'll look at the trouble code. And it says radar stain, component block. You get dirt on them. So, hey, somebody probably got it dirty. I see this all the time. We'll just erase it, yes. A lot of times people clean them. They don't erase the code. The code stays there. It was a historical code. So, now we're going to look at engine data. We'll get a bunch of stuff. So here we go. Here's the engine. And we will, as it pops up, select live data. Start her up. And we'll do all signals. Now you can imagine that with this Autel scanner, it's their top of the line. It's a MaxiSys Ultra. There's going to be data up the wazoo. See? Look at all this stuff. A lot of stuff to look at, but we'll look at the important thing. Voltage is fine, it's charging. The ignition time is fine. The air fuel alpha, it's almost perfect. It's 99, now it's 100. 100's perfect, so it's pretty close to perfect. Yes, airflow is good. No, the data's perfectly good, so it shows that even though the engine's making this noise, and like I say, I'll film it at the end, because I got to film it tomorrow morning when it's ice cold. And I'm sure it's the timing chain rattling around because the stupid tensioner has to pop out when the engine's cold. But it doesn't have any codes for the valve timing being off and stuff. So it's really not affecting the running of the car. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to go to measurements and we're going to go to the CAN bus system. And you got various things we can look at. We'll look at the high-speed CAN first. There's a high-speed CAN. Now we'll look at the low-speed CAN. You can see the low speed is the same, except of course it's a little bit lower. Well, we know the system's working, but that proves it. If there was a problem in the system, we can immediately see if it's in the high-speed system or the low-speed system. In this case, there's no problem. So again, this new scanner's coming in handy. Big so you can see it. Even an old guy like me who's half blind can read these things. So, another plus for this scan tool. I'm trying it out now, and so far I gotta say, it does things that I don't expect to see in a normal scan tool. Get out if you have an electric car, either hybrid or full electric, you can de-energize and energize the battery, which they say to do every 4 to 6 months. Realize the batteries in hybrid and electric cars have to be messed with every once in a while. They got to be drained out correctly, then filled back up again correctly, or they won't have such a long lifespan. They cost so much money, you want to do something like that. So you'd pay a mechanic like me to do it every, say, 4 to 6 months if you want the battery to last as long as possible. Now this Rogue has 175 horsepower, 2.5 liter 4-cylinder engine, but it's connected to a CVT transmission, the infamous Jacko transmission. I'm not really a fan, so let's see how it actually runs. As I mentioned, it was in a wreck. You heard that clunk. The suspension's got a little clunk on the right-hand side. You heard that. It's nothing outrageous, but to me it shows that they just didn't put it back together correctly. It's a little bit off. I looked on it. There's nothing really worn out or anything. But I can hear the wheel bearing roaring up front, so the wheel bearing was damaged and they didn't replace it. They should have. The ride's okay, not a spectacular ride, but it's a relatively short wheel-based vehicle. These are econo cars. They're not going to have the greatest ride in the world. It's mainly the CVT transmission that I want to test out here. So nobody that way, nobody that way. Here we go. bad. For CVT, it's got a lot of zip. It's got a lot more zip than the 2-liter Honda that I drove today too. And it's relatively zippy. You step on the gas, it makes a lot of noise, and it does go faster than the Honda CVT does. And of course, being a Nissan, they make decent suspension systems. They always make kind of zippy cars, so they handle quite well. Then again, it is a Jatco transmission. There's no saying how long this thing is going to go before it breaks, because they're notorious for breaking down. It goes uphill fine. 175 horsepower. Reasonable amount of horsepower for a little bitty car. And it's not a tiny engine like a 1.5 or 1.3. It's a 2.5 liter engine. It's a reasonable size. And for its size, it gets pretty good gas mileage. And the air conditioning is freezing cold. That's a plus. And it's certainly high enough up in the air. It's not going to be a problem going over this bump and not scraping anything. You can hear that clunk back there. That's some kind of bushing from the wreck, I'm assuming. Relatively comfy seats. Nice shaped steering wheel, black and chrome. And of course, you know, regular backup camera. Nothing swanky, it's kind of small, but fits in the dash. But we're gonna have to wait until tomorrow morning to hear the noise, because it only makes it when it's ice cold, so stay tuned. It won't take you long, an instant here, but it's gotta wait all night, so I'll film it in the morning. So here we go, early the next morning. It's gonna pour rain soon, so I got up early. We'll zoom in on the front and listen. Okay, hear that? Ta-dunka, ta-dunka. That's the timing chain. And actually, it's not that bad. It's just starting up. So, it can be that the timing chain tensioner is carboned up. It's dirty from not enough oil changes, right? The oil changed and flushed out. If it goes away entirely, it was because the carbon built up, right? Then the little rod on the hydraulic tensioner will slide better and the chain won't rattle. It runs fine. It has no code, so the timing's not off. In this case, bad oil changes hopefully just clogged it up. Maybe it won't have a problem, but they asked me should they keep it or not, and I'm going to stick to my guns on this. It runs good now. The noise isn't loud at all now. I'd say get rid of it and get yourself a Toyota and a Honda. This is her car, his car. It's a Toyota Prius that he loves, that he's driving all over the place. So that would make more sense in the long run. Used car prices are still high. To get some good money for this, get out of it. Get a better made car. Let's do an overview of Chrysler 200. What went wrong? Now, they only sold them for 7 years. They were competing against things like the Toyota Camry. Now, back in 2013, when this V6 Chrysler 200 was new, it was only about $2,000 cheaper than a V6 Toyota Camry. And if you compared this V6 200 to a 4-cylinder Camry back in the day, the 4-cylinder Camry was only $200 more than this car. Which leads me to wonder why anybody would even bought one in the first place. You get the legendary Toyota reliability for $200 more with a 4-cylinder and $2,000 more with a V6. Let's see what's under the hood of this thing. This is calling their world engines. 3.6 liter variable valve timing 6-cylinder engine. There it is. Since Fiat took over Chrysler, there's a lot of Italian design going on in some of these things. Maserati and Ferrari souped some of these up to put out a lot of horsepower. Not exactly known for reliability, Ferrari and Maserati, right? This particular one puts out 283 horsepower. Being a world car, guess where this particular one was made? Well, this engine was made in Mexico. They got 3 plants. 2 are in Michigan and 1's in Mexico. This is the Mexican engine. Again, not a place where high quality is known. But some of these engines, especially these earlier ones, had a problem with the heads and the valve seats and had to be rebuilt. Now, they only made the 200s for 7 years. They suckered a bunch of people in the beginning, but the last year they sold in the United States, 2017, they only sold about 18,000 of them. You can see the sales. Probably as people drove them, the engine didn't work right. They saw they were typical Chrysler, poorly made junk, and they couldn't give the things away. So they stopped making them. When you're competing against greats like Toyota Camry, Honda Accord, it amazes me that they actually sold 700-something thousand of these total in the United States. Well, we'll plug in the old scan tool and see what it says. It says P0520, engine oil pressure sensor circuit. Repair immediately if it runs bad. And it also has engine oil pressure sensor circuit low. Let's pray it's a simple fix. This is the oil pressure sending unit for this car. Now, unfortunately, in this horrible world design, I guess if that's the way the world was going, then the world is in horrible shape. That little sensor isn't big, but it's hiding under here. You got to take the whole top of the engine apart to get to it. Let's compare that to my '94 Celica. Now, it is 19 years older than that car. You can change the oil sending unit on this in 15 minutes. It may be 19 years older. It still has the original one because it's still working. That shows you Toyota quality versus Chrysler crap. Now, as you look under the car, you can see there's no oil dripping. It's not dangerous. If it was leaking, you could get low oil pressure. That's dangerous. If you actually had low oil pressure, of course, that would be dangerous too. But let's start it up here. It's not like the engine has rods knocking. If you actually lost oil pressure, the engine would sound horrible. And this one sounds totally normal for one of these that's got about 90,000 miles on it. So in this case, the only thing that's wrong is the warning system that warns you when the oil pressure has gone too low is broken. So you're gonna have to take this engine apart and spend hundreds of dollars replacing the warning device. Like I say, it's not making noise, it's not leaking, it's not like it's gonna be a problem for the time being, but your check engine light's gonna stay on. Can't get your car inspected if you live where cars inspected. So eventually you'd have to take the engine apart and replace the stupid little poorly made piece of metal and plastic so that the check engine light will go out. But luckily for the owner, this is Clarksville, Tennessee. They don't do that kind of inspection on cars, so he can just merrily drive along this way if he wants. If you don't want to spend a bunch of money taking the engine apart to replace a stupid warning device that is broken. Let's check the OEM enhanced data. Well, it still just shows the stupid one for the oil pressure sensor circuit. So let's look at live data. We're seeing the short-term fuel trim on bank 1 that's subtracting 3.9%, and the short-term fuel trim on bank 2 subtracting at 0, minus 3.1, minus 3.5 on 1. So it's running a little bit uneven. It's subtracting more fuel on bank 1 than on bank 2. I can feel a little jiggle in the engine, but that's normal with these things. They aren't perfectly made after all. They are made in Mexico. They don't hold up over time like a Toyota engine would. All right, let's do an all module scan. Here we go. It's going through all the modules. As you can see, it goes through an awful lot of stuff. They did load these things with a lot of electronics. And if you know anything about Chryslers, as they age, their electronics tend to go bonkers and have all kinds of wacky problems. But luckily for this, other than the oil pressure sending unit not working right electronically, the only code is B16. 155E, which is the parking lamp control circuit, is open. On these electronic monstrosities, even the parking lights are controlled by computers. But in the case of this one, I turned it on, checked them all, they're all working presently, so it's another thing you live with when you have a Chrysler that's starting to age. Now, as I said, they're nice looking cars, they got nice looking interiors and everything. Chrysler was always form over function. As my grandfather always said, he was a mechanic too, Chryslers, they're good looking cars, but they just don't hold up over time. I realized this was long before Mercedes-Benz bought them, and then sold them, and then Fiat bought them, and then Peugeot mixed it all together and calls it Stellantis. As far as I'm concerned, time goes on with Chrysler, quality goes down. And this V6 Pentastar World engine made in Mexico, it's no exception. Look at all the plastic crap on it. The plastic oil pressure sender's now broken. We gotta take all that apart to replace it if we want the light to go out. And look at the overall car. They are nice looking cars. They got style, there's no arguing with that. But in the case of these Chrysler 200s, ultimately, function won over form. They went from selling 170 something thousand to only selling 17,000 the last year. They don't sell them at all anymore. Now originally, when they brought this out, they had that big Super Bowl ad where I believe it was Eminem is riding down Detroit, and they're bragging about, oh, it's American made, blah blah, America, America. They always seem to do that in Super Bowl ads, right? But they picked the 200 and not the Chrysler 300. The 200 is made, or I should say assembled, in Michigan. This engine came from Mexico, but the vehicle was assembled in Michigan. But the 300s at the time were all made in Canada. So they decided, well, we'll show the 200, which is kind of a mistake, because the 300s are at least fast and zippy, and they could hold up a little, but the 200s, whew, they just failed miserably. So I guess I'll put the beauty cover back on. I don't know what a stupid idea that is. The beauty cover serves no purpose other than to hide the engine. I guess they didn't want people to see all that plastic crap on the engine, so they covered it up with another piece of plastic crap. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.